In tonight's episode, we'll uncover the drama behind Disneyland's 7th employee whose messy divorce made local headlines. We'll investigate whether Main Street, U.S.A. was actually an illegal construction project, and we'll reveal how the premature news leak nearly derailed one of Disneyland's most ambitious plans, the Disneyland Hotel. And if you thought Walt Disney's hit TV show was just a wholesome family program, well, think again. Critics were starting to call it out for being one giant ad. But is that kind of part of Walt's marketing genius? Brickey here, your ghost host, guiding you through the third week of 1955 and the third week of Old Disney News Tonight. Together we'll uncover the forgotten headlines and hidden stories from Monday, January 17th to Sunday, January 23rd, 1955. Let's start with the talk of the town, Disneyland's TV show. It wasn't just entertaining millions of Americans, it was stirring up some controversy. The Disneyland TV show was quickly becoming one of the most popular programs in America, but with popularity, as we all know, comes some criticism. And this is the thing, as I look back at this old news, people are absolutely raving about the Disneyland TV show, how innovative it was, how different it was. Like, it seemed like Walt could do no wrong. And that is typically when your critics will come out to have a thing or two to say. Well, here's the thing, the critic wasn't exactly wrong. This gets in the debate of Walt Disney's idea of entertainment and marketing, something that was absolutely new in 1955. But that's part of what made the Disneyland TV show so groundbreaking. Walt Disney seamlessly blended entertainment and marketing, something almost unheard of at the time. This week's episode was Monsters of the Deep, and it featured exciting glimpses of giant squids, deep sea serpents, and appearances by Kirk Douglas and Peter Lorre. And think about it, at this time, there's no DVD extras. Getting to see behind the camera and how things are made was way more of a big deal in 1955 than it would be to you or I today in 2025. However, it didn't take long for critics to notice that there was also a massive plug for Walt's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in the episode this week. One critic pointed out that Peter Lorre even urged viewers to head to their local theater to see the film.
Well, that'll give you a small idea. I'm sure that you'll want to see the whole story in a theater for yourself.
Subtle? Not really. And here's why Walt was pushing the film so hard. It wasn't doing that well at the box office, which I think is interesting to us because we think of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as this big, epic movie that has ties to Disneyland. And a lot of these old films would be released time and time again. So they're kind of like a snowball moving down the mountain. But if the opening weeks are a little bit short and Walt's looking at how much he spent versus how much is coming in, that's when an entrepreneur will hit the panic button. But Walt was always ahead of the curve. He was unapologetic about using TV as a promotional tool. After all, TV was making him a household name. He saw it as the perfect way to build excitement for his projects, whether it was a movie or, as we all know, Disneyland the TV show was designed to promote a theme park. Critics might have seen it as shameless, but Walt saw it as innovative. Love it or hate it, this marketing tactic helped lay the foundation for Disneyland's success. But while Walt was tackling TV controversies, another surprising story was making headlines this week. Now imagine picking up the paper and seeing a headline about a divorce. But what does that have to do with Disneyland? Let me explain. This week, a story about a divorce made headlines. Emily Whitney was awarded $300 in alimony. I only laugh because what would you do with $300 today? And she wanted $750, so, he got her at a price. After a legal battle with her estranged husband, George Whitney Jr. After 2 years of marriage, George filed for divorce last year on grounds of extreme cruelty. What do you think Emily was doing to George that was extreme cruelty? I bet it is that she wasn't sleeping with him enough. That sounds like a dude's way of being like, that's extremely cruel not to do that. But this is where it gets interesting. George Whitney Jr., he was born in 1922 in San Francisco to George K. Whitney Sr. His father and Uncle Leo Whitney were the masterminds behind Playland at the Beach, a historic 10-acre seaside amusement park located next to the Ocean Beach in San Francisco. Playland at the Beach began as a collection of amusement rides and concessions in the late 19th century and evolved into a full-fledged amusement park by 1928. It featured attractions like the Shoot the Chutes ride. Shoot the Chutes. Shoot the Chutes. They were witty with the way they wrote it out. A 1914 carousel, fun houses, arcades, and was even the birthplace of its iconic ice cream sandwich. If this is where the ice cream sandwich came from, then all in on this place. After serving in the Army Corps during World War II, George Jr. joined the family business, managing arcades and rides along the Playland Midway. But in the early 1950s, when Walt Disney was planning Disneyland, he sought experienced professionals to bring his vision to life. George Jr. seized the opportunity and became Disneyland's 7th employee, bringing invaluable amusement park experience to the project. So if you think about this, Walt needed to get some people that knew amusement parks. So his 7th hire was poor George Whitney, who had a cruel ex-wife. At Disneyland, George Jr. served as the director of ride operations, applying his expertise to help shape the park's attractions and guest experiences. His unique background made him a key player in Disneyland's early days. It's a small story in the grand scheme of things, but it's a reminder that the people Walt hired had unique backgrounds and occasionally dramatic personal lives that helped shape Disneyland's early days. And speaking of big moves, let's talk about the surprising decisions happening on Main Street, USA this week. Are you ready for some 70-year-old construction updates? I thought you were. I think this is fascinating. And this is the type of stuff I was hoping to be in your ghost host of Old News Tonight. These are the type of things that I wanted to scratch the surface on. Things that I hadn't heard before, even though I've consumed several books about Disneyland. Construction update, 70 years delayed. Let's start with the $90,000 permit Disney pulled for the construction of Main Street, USA. Hear me out on this one. It is fascinating. On paper, the buildings of Main Street, USA were described as movie set pieces. That meant lightweight materials, synthetic second stories, and facades designed to look like the perfect turn-of-the-century town, but without the structural permanence you might expect. Now, on the surface, this seems like a creative way to bring Main Street to life efficiently, but here's where this gets interesting if you think about it. Was Walt, or most likely C.V. Wood, pulling a fast one on the city of Anaheim? By labeling the buildings on Main Street, USA as movie sets, could they have been stepping around building codes, inspections, high property taxes, and other red tape? Think about it. Walt Disney was working against two huge obstacles, time and money. Declaring these buildings as movie sets and not actual commercial, retail, and restaurant space would make things go so much faster and so much more affordable. Disneyland needed to open by summer of 1955, and every delay risked turning his dream park into a financial disaster. Like, they were gung-ho on making that date, which we learned last episode was supposed to be July 15th. Cutting corners, if that's what this is, might have been necessary to keep this massive project on track. It's something to debate. Was this a smart and practical move, or was Disney bending the rules a little bit in their favor? And speaking of interesting business decisions, let's talk about the Red Wagon Inn. This week, Disney set it up to operate as a separate business, even though they had secretly owned and ran it. So why go through the trouble of having the Swift & Company create the Red Wagon Company, a fictitious name or a doing business as, likely to give themselves some operational and financial flexibility during the park's early days when every dollar and every decision mattered. For those of you that don't know, the Red Wagon was the Red Wagon Inn, is what the full name became. It's where the Plaza Inn sits today. So when you step out of the Plaza Inn and you walk over to the corn dog cart that is the Little Red Wagon, that is a nod to the original namesake of the business that sit there on the corner of the hub. They did this likely to give themselves some operational and financial flexibility during the park's early days. Once again, being creative to save that money and time, when every dollar and every decision absolutely mattered. These construction updates point to a fascinating picture of how Walt and his team blended imagination and strategy, and perhaps a little rule bending to bring Disneyland to life. You see, they just weren't being creative with their theme park design, they were being creative with their theme park business model. But as exciting as these updates were, the biggest story of the week wasn't about what was being built inside Disneyland, it's about what would sit right next to it. While the construction of Disneyland itself was well underway, Walt Disney had an even bigger plans for what would surround the park. This week, in 1955, one of the most ambitious projects tied to Disneyland was announced, the Disneyland Hotel. The Disneyland Hotel wasn't going to be just any hotel. it was a bold vision combining the luxury of a resort with the convenience of a motor hotel. It was going to be the first in many ways. For example, it would be the first hotel in the U.S. to have a color TV in every single room. This was a technological marvel in 1955. This $10 million hotel would be the biggest and most expensive hotel built in California post-World War II. The plans included dormitories specifically for student groups. Picture this: 2-story dormitory buildings with 10 rooms each, accommodating 20 people per room at nominal rates. These were meant for school groups who would stay overnight to tour Disneyland. This concept highlights how Disneyland in its early days was envisioned as part theme park and part educational experience, kind of like a museum. A vision Walt would eventually move away from as the design of the park would evolve. Dining and entertainment were also a huge focus. The hotel was planned to have several restaurants with a combined seating capacity of 1,250, along with the cocktail lounges and bars that could hold an additional 500 other guests. They were guessing on launching somewhere between 10 to 15 retail spaces as well. Now, if all of this sounds familiar, it's because the original Disneyland Hotel concept paved the way for what would eventually become Downtown Disney and Disney Springs, having shopping and entertainment outside of the paid gates. For transportation, the hotel promised a convenient system, buses running every 5 minutes to the theme park entrance that was pretty nearby. That's what the plan said, but here's what actually happened. Instead of buses, the hotel used small tractors pulling trams to get guests to the park. It wasn't until 1961, 2 years after the monorail debuted, that the hotel was directly connected to the monorail at Disneyland. The Disneyland Hotel project was spearheaded by Jack Rather, a successful hoteler who owned Palm Springs El Horizon and Las Vegas Twin Lakes Lounge, 2 properties that were already well known at the time. Rather's involvement allowed Walt to focus on the park while ensuring the hotel lived up to Disneyland's high standards. Also, Walt didn't have any money left over to build a hotel, so he gave Jack, a TV guy, a money guy, a Texas guy, I believe, an oil guy, gave him first shot. And by the way, both of these properties still exist today. So if you're ever in Palm Springs, check out El Horizon and you'll know you're staying at a hotel with some Disney history and Disney ties. Once again, connecting Palm Springs and Disneyland in several bizarre ways. But here are where things got messy. The hotel announcement wasn't supposed to go public until Sunday, January 23rd, giving Disney's PR team time to create a perfect rollout. However, a local newspaper jumped the gun and wouldn't leak the story on that Wednesday. The news hit the press ahead of schedule, leaving Disney scrambling to manage the buzz. Even Walt couldn't control every headline, but the premature leak ended up adding to the excitement rather than taking away from it. So on Wednesday, an article comes out leaking this. And then Friday, you see a couple of other newspapers like hurry up and get an article out. But on Sunday, you saw like the LA Times, well-researched, well-laid out piece that they had been sitting on for that big announcement on Sunday. So it's kind of interesting to see like people are excited about Disneyland. They're just like talking about it, getting the word out any way that they can. Now, the original announcement promised big things and tight timelines, but reality, as we all know, didn't quite match up. And Hotel would officially open on October 5th, 1955, not on opening day as promised, nearly 3 months after Disneyland itself. Strikes delayed the opening, pushing it back from the original date that they had promised everybody in the pre-opening promotional materials. But when it finally opened, the hotel wasn't the grand destination of 200 rooms as it had been promised. It started with just 100 rooms spread across 5 2-story guest complexes, later known as the South Garden Rooms. These rooms were rented for $15 a night. That's about $171 today, which in reality, a hotel room now costs $700 a night. So Disney's inflation is way different than the real world's inflation. The promised amenities like shopping and dining and recreational facilities weren't ready until 1956. However, there were some unique features right from the start, like a doctor and a dentist on site, as well as a hairdresser and a beauty salon, proving the hotel was aiming to be more than just a place to sleep. Eventually, the Disneyland Hotel celebrated its official grand opening August 25th, 1956, with Hollywood stars and celebrities attending. By then, it had started to live up to its lofty promises, but it was a much slower journey than they had originally planned. But just think about this for a minute. Right now, this week, they're announcing they're building a hotel at Disneyland. And in October, people were staying there. That's pretty fast. So friends, that wraps up the third week of 1955. Next week, we'll uncover even more stories about how Walt's Dream Park came together piece by piece. Please show up and don't miss it. Thank you so much for showing up and watching tonight's Old Disney News tonight. I want to thank all my Magic Brickey key holders for helping make tonight's video possible.